Passion projects are a luxury, but at the moment, it's one that Hollywood can ill afford. That's why Gotham Knights has recently got cancelled. Gotham Knights has everything that Hollywood wants.
Really? Because your birth certificate says you were born.
Don't use his dead name.
They've managed to cram every stereotype into one glorious train wreck.
I'm not really feeling it.
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you using me as bait? Way to set feminism back a few decades.
You could put this at an award ceremony and everyone could stand up and clap at just how virtuous we have made the world.
Just seems like you two are a lot alike. You're both literal geniuses.
I made sure no genius on genius homicide happened.
There is a problem though. Nobody wants to see it. I mean, this is a show where in its 5th episode, it was already getting lower ratings than Batwoman was on their 51st episode, which is kind of surprising when you find out they were written by the same people. And if these three can't inspire within you the Batman atmosphere, then I don't know what will. The living embodiment of the Dark Knight.
Another case of a man taking credit for a woman's work.
But I think Gotham Knights is the perfect example of not quality over quantity, but the message over money. Because Gotham Knights exemplified 2 of these things. It had ideology and identity plastered all over the walls. But it was also very, very cheap. The cheapest show that CW has ever made. And so yes, its viewing numbers were absolutely terrible, but did it really need that many viewers to begin with? Because you have to remember, this is the CW, and the CW has never been profitable since its formation in 2006. This is a company that has been used to losing money for the last 17 years. But something has changed, because it actually lost so much money that it got bought out by Nexstar, and there's only so long a company will run at a loss. So even though people were willing to do it when the times were good, eventually you're like, this is just a wasted asset, let's see if we can get rid of it. And the next guys, they want to make it profitable, with their actual plan to bring it to profitability by 2025. So even Nexstar was like, okay, we have a long road to go. But something interesting happened because yes, CW was the cheapest show ever made, but it got cancelled when Superman and Lois actually got renewed. And while James Gunn has said the show will continue for a couple more seasons because it's a show that everybody likes, so we're going to keep it going for a little bit. From the perspective of viewing numbers, that isn't really true, because it's still only pulling in 662,000 people, compared to 360 for Gotham Knights. And you're like, okay, percentage-wise, that's a big increase, but in the grand scheme of things, 300,000 isn't that big of a difference, especially when Gotham Knights is the cheapest show ever made, whereas Superman and Lois cost them $5 million an episode, putting the show's full season price tag at $75 million. Because when you put that into perspective, an extra 300,000 viewers doesn't exactly rock the boat anymore, does it? And you don't have to take my word for it, when you can take head of network Brad Schwartz's word for it instead. As covered by Bounding Into Comics, he said, Superman and Lois is creatively very strong. It does well for us in broadcast. The numbers would really disagree with that there. It does well in digital, but it's expensive, and it doesn't make money for us. And of course it doesn't help that they don't even have the rights to the prior seasons, and you need a library for people to actually go and find the show in the first place. Who wants to jump to a series on one network, only to find out that the start of that series is somewhere else? So Superman and Lois is a series that cost them far more money, probably lost them more money given the relatively small amount of viewer difference between the two, given the difference in budgets, and it wasn't even good for bringing people to their network, because they didn't have the rights to the prior series, and so no one was going to find it there to begin with. And yet despite all of these problems compared to Gotham Knights' low cost and appeal to their belief system, Gotham Knights is still the one that got cancelled, all because according to James Gunn, it's a show that everybody likes. Which is a classic business strategy. If we have a product that people like but it's losing money, we might be able to rejig the costs of that, bring in more people, keep the quality high, and it could reach profitability. Now compare that to Gotham Knights, which was just crap. Yeah, it was cheap crap, but no one was ever going to like that thing, and it was unsalvageable. Its main benefit is that it preached what the writers wanted to say, but it didn't say what the audience wanted to hear. And previously, the CW would have just renewed their entire slate. But with Nexstar, when money mattered, it meant they had to trim out different shows, rather than just renewing everything. Shows like Gotham Knights, which are marketed based off the characteristics of the actors that have been hired for it, rather than the quality of the script, are a luxury, and it's one that various companies throughout Hollywood simply can't afford anymore. And when money matters, quality begins to matter. That's why Gotham Knights gets cancelled, while Superman Superman carries on, even when it costs them more money to begin with. Because if the audience likes it, there's things you can do, things you can change to eventually hit profitability, even if it means you have to wait until 2025. Go through the shows, see their reaction, and make changes based on that in order to eventually get profitable. That's why Superman's coming back, but it's not without its strings. Superman and Lois, All-American Homecoming, and various others will have cast reductions and budget cuts, even after their renewal. Because of the show's high price point, the network is shifting in pursuit of profitability. We've got a shortened 4th season, and Warner Brothers made a proposal where it would reduce the license fee that it could make the shows for. And while not the $1 million an episode that the CW had been targeting, it is a significant reduction to make the series feasible for the network. So if it cost $5 million an episode before, they wanted to get it down to 1, that's 20% of the budget per episode. But also, if you're only doing a 10-episode season, you're bringing the full season price tag down from $75 million to 10. This shows why it's so important for money to matter, because they already had an audience. 662,000 people, and sure, they can try and bring more people to that, but if they need a show to be profitable, they simply cut the budget until that many viewers is actually worthwhile and profitable on its own. If something's a cheap show, it doesn't need many viewers, and so you can keep a show going forever and ever. But Gotham Knights was different. Gotham Knights was already the cheapest show they had, and its viewers still couldn't support it. And so because it was cheap already, there was no headroom for them to bring the budget down anymore, and their only option was to cancel it. And this is in stark contrast to what the CW used to do, which would have just been renew everything anyway, no matter how low amount of viewers it had. Even if your demo is 0.04, which is important because this is the demo that brings in all the revenue. 18 to 49 are the people that spend the majority of the money. And so if you don't have many of them, you won't have many advertisers who want to get them as customers in the first place. And the CW had already learned that lesson before on its other shows, like the Winchesters that got cancelled after 1 season, for similar reasons, with viewer numbers of 439,000 and a 0.05 demo. And Hollywood needs something to keep them on the straight and narrow, so if having low budgets and no money makes them focus on quality, then that's exactly what we want. Because this is an article going all the way back to 1996, talking about Hollywood and how it's basically a political money machine. They've always been biased, and everybody knows it. The issue is, when something becomes one-sided, it attracts like for like. And if the attitude is that that is a feature, and therefore we must suppress anyone of the opposite opinion, then that's exactly what you get. Dissenting opinion becomes the enemy because the bias is considered a feature, not a bug. And so CW could have enforced that before. They could have renewed their entire slate. Because while the network itself hasn't turned a profit, it was never designed to do so. They were intended to spam out shows that they could license to Netflix, as well as sell internationally, and then they didn't care if anybody watched it because it was no longer their problem. We make this crap, we give it to somebody else, and let it burn. It's essentially the mortgage crisis of 2008 put into entertainment form. Here's some trash, I've sold the trash, now it's not my problem anymore. Now the issue with those mortgages is the banks got so confident that what they were selling was actually not trash, because it's making them loads of money. How could it be awful? They actually started to keep them on their books themselves, which is exactly what CW did. Because their model proved extremely fruitful, the network's parent companies opted against selling the shows to Netflix so that they could put them on their own services. And because they needed to retain all of the global rights, they couldn't sell them internationally either. And without these licensing agreements, the CW's business model no longer worked, and they started to look to sell it, while cancelling more shows than it had done in a decade. There was simply so much money flying around from the different streamers licensing all of these shows, which they probably shouldn't have done, that places like the CW could get away with making trash. They could renew crap series after crap series and still make profit on it because they were just selling it off to somebody else. But the moment they weren't palming off their problems and they had to deal with the consequences of their own actions, well, even the cheapest of their shows simply isn't good enough anymore. And even the ones highly regarded are just too expensive. The sheer amount of money flying around, palming off your problems onto somebody else, meant that these networks could indulge in what they'd always wanted to. What Hollywood has always wanted to. We can burn characters like Batman because we hate him, put in people that we want to see, and hire writers who have absolutely no talent at all. And even when their own shows get cancelled, we can let them fail upwards into new positions to make the same mistakes all over again, simply because we know they'll write shows with a messaging that we believe in. whether it's profitable or not. But that attitude only works when you can make your problems somebody else's, when the licensing agreements and the streamer wars are in full swing. But when streaming revenue plummets, so does their ability to license your shows. Or if you're the CW, you were stupid enough to decide not to do that in the first place anyway. Suddenly, your decision-making matters. All of those talentless hacks that you've hired, well, they've got to go, because the axe is falling, and we're just desperately trying to make it not fall on our heads. CW may be a special case because of their business model, but they are a sign of what's happening to the entire industry. Places like Disney may be able to float their TV shows off other revenue streams, but there are a lot of companies who rely on their TV revenue, and that means they've got to make money, which leads to quality shows. Now, the problem is, everybody knows that this isn't what audiences want. They've always known it, so they just didn't care before. As long as the money's flowing, they didn't have a reason to care before. But things are changing, and people are getting scared. Deadline is now just openly admitting that Hollywood is involved in a culture war, and it's the writers which are doing the damage. Now, given that Hollywood is an international business who wants to sell their shows to foreign audiences to make money, you would think that they might actually have that in mind and try and make shows which have nothing to do with your local social opinions. No, because now we're just mask off admitting that American stuff in 2016 is what made many movies, television, and late-night talk shows change. With a viewpoint that is proudly on display, that Hollywood is a powerful, vocal, left-leaning cultural force, that the Oscars and the Emmys annually underscore their core beliefs about the weather, patriarchy. I don't want to say it too loudly, I'm never sure whether it's in the room. I've not paid my guild dues this month. What if it comes for me? And Californian bigotry. But for this to happen, it requires writers who, for the moment, aren't writing.
It's afraid. It's afraid!
It's the perfect storm, an industry collapsing as revenues plummet. Writers who have written trash for a couple of decades, demanding more money, and a desperate need to leave behind everything those writers value in order to become profitable. At this point, I don't even know how you square that circle, because it doesn't look like the writers really want to leave that behind. With people saying if the strike goes on any longer, the actors will miss their award ceremonies. And how will these entertainment companies cope if they don't have a platform to wax lyrical about their own bigotry? If they don't have a platform to scream at the plebs about how disgusting they are, how will Hollywood survive? No, unless the writers come back, Hollywood's removal from the culture war will soon begin to tell. It's definitely an article written by somebody who realizes that they're the problem and revels in it. But that attitude is rife in Hollywood, and it always has been. It's just the streaming wars and the sheer amount of money available allowed them to indulge in it. They could hate the customer, insult them, call them everything under the sun.
Some of the fan base have decided to attack Moses Ingram online. Just sickened me to my stomach. You're no Star Wars fan in my mind.
The Star Wars fan base really seems to be the most kind of toxic. Star Trek was woke from the beginning, you know,
Yeah.
A little bit more diversity and everyone's kicking off about it.
And get away with it, because they didn't care about the viewers. As long as they were licensing their shows to a streamer, it was somebody else's problem. Somebody else was paying for it. Well, not anymore. Now, you're responsible for your own crap. And it shows. Because if you made a show this bad, or as bad as Batwoman, you wouldn't expect to be promoted to work onto another show. If that's the quality of your work, I'm not giving you another penny, because I'm not going to get it back. That's the attitude of every other private business on Earth. And it's about time that Hollywood had to face the standard reality of economics, which everybody else does. You've got customers, they matter, and you can't insult them anymore. You've got customers who have the money that you want, and if you want it, you're going to have to give them something that they find valuable enough. And oh, the horror, you might actually have to treat the people with money with respect. I've been asked before, it's like, well, why are you cheering for things like Gotham Knights getting cancelled? Isn't that where you make your videos from? And it's like, yes. But I could make videos on anything. I could change styles. And I'd have to, because in this job, you survive off the quality of your work. And that's the reality that Hollywood has managed to avoid up until this point. And now, for the first time in many years, the hens are coming home to roost. And there's going to be a lot of people in Hollywood who can't adapt, because they were never hired for their talent in the first place. And if you were hired for beliefs that the customer base simply doesn't want, then let's face it, that was always going to be a road to nowhere. And it looks like CW is already beginning to ram into the wall at the end of it. And if a few companies have to go bankrupt so that everybody else learns that this isn't what you do anymore, then it's going to be a valuable lesson that Hollywood has taken far too long to learn. But those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.